All right, this is part two of the so-called bathroom bill issue piece. Basically, what's going on right now is that Stephen A. Simp, he pretty much knows that the conversation is too big for him. So he's going to pass the baton and pass the buck to the two Caucasian men because he knows his place. Stephen A. is he's a good Negro. He knows his place very, very well. And he knows the hierarchy that I laid out very, very well. Right? And that's going to be the true condemnation of a lot of these so-called liberal black men. All right? Their true condemnation is that they know better, but they choose to act like they don't know better because they want to join in it and they want to be loved by everybody. All right? And that's for a lot of you so-called liberal black brothers out there who listen to this video and maybe try to jump on the comments and talk silly about the black woman is God and all that other nonsense. You guys are going to face a reckoning one day, and you're going to be forced to acknowledge that you were completely erroneous and you betrayed the true hierarchy. All right. You can't call yourself a king when you're always trying to put somebody above you. All right. But anyway, let's see what they're talking about here.
Remember, Michael Jordan and the Charlotte Hornets pushed long and hard for the rights to have the NBA All-Star Weekend in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how much money Michael Jordan has or how much clout he has. Michael Jordan on the hierarchy is beneath the lowest level homosexual in this society. Like I said, the so-called black man is the lowest on the liberal totem pole. All right. They just acknowledge you like they would a dog, right? When they eat at the table, they call the dog over and give him a bone. That's what they do to you so-called black males. But y'all still want to be so-called liberal blacks, right? You still want to follow behind these so-called liberal whites. You have no form of self-definition. Then you wonder why you don't get respected. He knows better. That's why he's speaking humbly. Normally, he's boisterous. Let it be an issue about so-called black males and watch how boisterous he gets.
It was incredibly disappointing to them after years of planning that they ultimately had to have the All-Star festivities moved to New Orleans until a couple of years down the road.
New Orleans. Notice it, and it wasn't a coincidence that they moved it to New Orleans. New Orleans is a cesspool of quote-unquote homosexuality, transgenderism, and pedophilia. All right, pederasty per se. That's why they moved it there. Right? Adam Silver probably couldn't wait to get it moved there. He probably went down there and had a good old time himself. All right?
Oh, I'm saying, listen, we live in different times, and certainly...
Man, Adam Silver was probably walking around with probably pulling his shirt open and showing his chest for beads.
Max, there's a lot of things that are worthy of being protested.
Allegedly.
And I do understand that. However, the folks in North Carolina, they may have had a problem with this. This outcome may have very well taken place without the All-Star festivities being relocated from Charlotte to New Orleans.
No, it would not have taken place without it being relocated. They got choked out, Stephen A. Right? Don't try to change up and act like they would have repealed the law on its own. There are still people who don't know, who realize the ridiculousness of this entire bill. All right? It's ridiculous. The only thing that the bill basically stated is that until you have a full operation and hormonal treatment, that you should be going into the bathroom of the gender that you were born in. Like I said, if you have had the full operation and the hormonal treatments, no one should even be able to tell that you are a gender that you were not born. How could it be an issue? That's why I say it's very clear that the protesting against this bill is for cross-dressers. It's not for transgenders.
It might have been, the same result might have occurred if the NCAA hadn't elected to get involved and make sure its voice was heard. It certainly didn't help, it hurt rather, in terms of that cause. But I think we have to give the citizens of North Carolina and other states throughout this country an opportunity to show what they're worth. Just because a governor or an elected official comes up and they propose something and they push for something does not necessarily mean that the citizens of a particular state are not going to raise up. It may not have been necessary at all for all of this to transpire. I'm basically saying that without the NCAA and the NBA's involvement, we very well may have found ourselves at this very conclusion without all of that that took place.
Stephen A., have you ever considered that maybe the NCAA and the NBA are on the take? And that's why they did what they did? Have you considered that? Like I said before, there's rumblings that the NFL is also getting involved in this bathroom bill thing. Have you considered that they're getting probably multi-million-dollar in the nine figures or maybe even billion-dollar grants from the U.S. government to help choke out these states? Right? The real moves are made in silence. The real moves are made behind closed doors. Right? That's how they're made. Don't ever believe what you see out in the open from these major companies and corporations. Everything is about the money. Like I said before, people don't do things for the sake of people. They do things for the sake of resources. All right. Very, very clear that the NBA and the NCAA, they're getting their palms greased behind closed doors by some entity that has more power than them or has something to offer them. Most likely the so-called U.S. government. Allegedly.
Place. That's all I'm saying.
Well, so first of all, Stephen, I think you're incredibly right on one thing and entirely wrong on another. First of all,
Okay.
your humility about
Humility? Man, please.
About the issue, about where you might stand on it, your confusion is a healthy humility that is shared by, I would suspect, most people in this society.
Not at all. No, there's no confusion, and he's not confused. The only people that's confused are the people who claim to not know what gender they are. That's a major, major issue. All right? They're mentally disturbed, and they need help. They need assistance. But they cannot get assistance because the powers that be are telling them that they're okay. That's a major problem. And it's an even more of a major problem that now they want to go to whichever bathroom they choose. And if a guy just wakes up one day and decides that he's a woman that day, that means that he should go to the woman's bathroom? And that's okay? Okay, I hear you.
Where we stand on the transgender issue morally, societally, philosophically, psychologically.
And where are all the so-called strong women? Where are they at? Shouldn't they be standing up in unison saying, look, I don't want to go to the bathroom with some guy who walks in there with a wig on and decides that he's a woman that day. I don't, quote unquote, feel safe. Where are they at?
Is very far from over. It's a new issue for this society to be debating, and it is one that we are only at the very beginning of.
I agree with that. This is just the beginning.
So anyone with clarity on this, I think is well ahead, at the very least, well ahead of the rest of society on it.
Well, then I must be well ahead because I have a lot of clarity on this issue, dude. It's not that difficult. If your joint goes out, you go to the men's room. If your joint goes in, you go to the women's room. It's not that difficult to figure out.
On it. So I don't think you have anything to be ashamed of when it comes to, I don't know where I stand on this issue. But I also think you're wrong on the impact of the NCAA and to a lesser extent the NBA on what's happening in North Carolina right now. And I would suggest to you, Max, I'm not sure you're being entirely consistent on this. Just hear me out. What's happening, you're right, is an utter and entire mess in North Carolina. This bill, for the critics of HB2, is far from satisfactory. It is essentially a reset that says discrimination laws will be handled at the state level. So Charlotte can't go about setting anti-discrimination laws such as the kind that HB2 tried to get away with. So the point there is critics are not satisfied with where North Carolina is today. Now, I'm not going to get into the merits of this bill. I'm not going to get into the politics, but I just want to read you these polls right here. These are from the Charlotte Observer. Okay. The majority of North Carolinians want to repeal HB2.
I don't believe that.
Over 50% want HB2 repealed. However, over 50% of North Carolinians also want transgender people to use the bathroom assigned by their birth certificate. So
now what type of sense does that make? They want to repeal the bill that actually has the sentiment of what they claim to want. You see how these fools talk in circles?
The point there is they don't like HB2, but they like what it did in effect, at least on some of the most controversial parts.
No, they don't like the fact that they're getting hammered by the liberal media for that bill, and now they're economically getting choked out as a state. That's what it is. So they're willing to repeal the bill for now to get back some of the perks of having a lot of these sporting events and concerts and the monetary boom that it will bring to their state.
So what precipitated this change? The NCAA did. Loss of $4 billion in business, according to the AP, over a dozen years. That's why people wanted HB2 gone. I'm just connecting the dots here. If they like some of the aspects of the bill, but they don't like the bill, what they dislike is the effect it's had on their economy and their society. Now, Max, this is the last point I want to ask you for consistency on. I'm not going to make too many assumptions. Are you really entirely comfortable with businesses walking into states and dictating politics? Are you really entirely comfortable with money in big business, and in this case the NCAA, telling democratically elected officials and laws the way it should be, or their money walks? Is that going to apply to how you feel about lobbying? Is that going to apply to how you feel about
No, actually, that is the question, because that's the sentiment that you gave, right? But right now, this so-called conservative white man has pinned you in a corner. So now you have to try to, while playing your role, talk yourself out of it. That's why he got his eyes closed right now. He's getting frustrated. Somebody should ask him, since you have 2 daughters, would it be okay for a man who woke up that morning saying that he's a woman to go to the bathroom with your 2 daughters while they're in there? Would that be okay?
Everything, or just when the outcomes are such that you like?
When you talk about public opinion polls, and I acknowledge we don't have to get into a whole side conversation about this issue, this social and political issue, but when you talk about public opinion polls, it reminds me of the gay marriage issue, when people kept bringing up public opinion polls as though rights were up for referendum. They're not. That's why they're rights. And the idea of who deserves protection under the law, does everyone deserve equal protection under the law? I would say yes.
I would say no. Because what constitutes a man or a woman has to first be established first if you're going to decide how rights are enforced for a man and a woman. All right. Once you lose mental stability, you tend to lose your rights. Right. There's a certain standard that you have to uphold as a man and a woman, which has a definition in order for you to be deserving of rights. That's why we don't give certain rights to creatures that are lower than men and women. Right. Once you decide that you're going to be a serial killer, you lose certain rights. You know why? Because you're no longer living up to the standard of being a man or a woman. Now you're a criminal. There's certain things that must be established, but this is the confusion that comes with a lot of these liberal meanderings. He's talking himself into a circle. Now he's trying to talk his way out of it.
The idea that somehow there's predatory behavior by a certain group of people in bathrooms when there's zero evidence for that.
That's a lie. That is not zero evidence for that. As a matter of fact, there's a reason why they just had an issue here in New York at the Port Authority bus terminal with police officers that had to pose undercover to stop homosexual men from going in the bathroom and having sex all the time. All right. They just had an issue now with the I believe it's the athletic director at Penn State or the dean at Penn State. I can't remember which one, who made a statement about the victims of Jerry Sandusky needing to get over it. All right. And we're going to cover that a little later. So there is irrefutable evidence that people that have gender identity disorder and sexual orientation disorder tend to not only harass other people, but they also tend to engage in what's known as pedophilia or pederasty. All right. And they do tend to exhibit predatory behavior. There's no doubt about that. Even though they claim that they just want to be left alone and left amongst each other, that's a lie, because if they did, like I stated earlier, they would have their own circle. They would have their own community that they tended to gravitate towards. No, they try to exhibit predatory behavior against those who are sexually or have a sexual orientation that is appropriate or proper or conventional.
For that, wait a minute. When there's zero evidence for that, they came up with a solution, an unworkable solution to a problem that didn't exist. The NBA looked at that and said, "Nope, we don't like that. We think there's a right and a wrong side to this issue."
Obviously, that there was an issue with cross-dressers going into different bathrooms. That's why they passed the bill. You must understand that North Carolina is what's known as a Bible state. All right. Those people still go to church and they practice whatever their beliefs are, but they still adhere to certain old school values, and they're just not going to succumb to the modern progressive mentality. So obviously there was an issue. And like I stated earlier, he's lying when he says that there is no proof of predatory behavior. Homosexuals have a far higher rate of being pedophiles because more often than not, they were the victims of pedophilia when they were young. That's why they're homosexuals and lesbians now.
We want to be on the right side of history. We will take our business elsewhere. I think that's a commendable thing for big business to do. Yes, I do.
Max, first of all, just to be clear, we're not debating the merits of whether or not these are rights recognized by the Constitution. Me citing polls, trust me, has no impact on what I think are constitutional rights.
At the time that the Constitution was written, it was common to take a homosexual or a lesbian and burn them at the stake. So it's laughable that they try to apply the rights of the Constitution to this nonsense that they're trying to push now.
Me citing polls is showing you what affected change here, and we're not disagreeing on this, I think, is the NCAA and the NBA. But what I am asking you of you, Max, and I am dead serious here and not trying to fill in too many blanks about what all your political beliefs are you really going to hold this stance no matter the outcome going forward? Are you really going to look at business flexing its money muscle to get the outcome it wants and celebrate that fact?
That's your point.
Hold on, Max. Or only when it advances an opinion that you already hold?
You know, we're going to continue on part 3. Peace.